Hey everyone, welcome back to Two Pitch Floating. This is Jake, Brandon, and Jonah, and today we're doing something a little different other than the weekly podcast. We're going to be doing a Rhinar deck tech with the calling champ, Rhinar Master himself, Jonah Overholt. So
Oh,
Jonah, this
oh.
is this is your deck that you made for us to go over today, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. So Jonah's gonna kind of go through it, and then me and Brandon are just gonna ask some questions about it. So I think Brandon had a pretty good question to start off with.
Yeah, dude. What is up with that Ragamuffins hat? Spill the beans.
Yeah. So it's pretty. Blitz is a very high, as we all know, Blitz is a high variance format. So a lot of times it's like one or two turns. Like you don't often get like the real grindy Blitz games. They do happen, but not very often. So Berserk, a card that most I think Rhinar enthusiasts have said that isn't very viable in CC because a lot of the times we are on the back foot or we have to play the other hero's game. And that card definitely says like we're having fun playing our own game. So, but in Blitz, where you only have 20 life, like we've seen Berserk turns do 32 plus damage. So it's like, yeah, this probably works. So with that, Ragamuffins, I played a lot of Kano the last few weeks, just getting some reps in. And he uses Ragamuffins. And when if for those of you who don't know, Ragamuffin says it says instant destroy Ragamuffins hat, draw a card, then put a card from your hand on the top or bottom of your deck. Activate this ability only if you have one card in hand. Uh, so a lot of the times when you're discarding as Rhinar, you have two, sixes in hand, and you're discarding one of them, and then you have one in hand when the Rhinar Intimidate triggers. So with Berserk on the stack, it'd be like, Rhinar, Berserk, and then you have one card in hand. And for Berserk to work, it has to be a six on top. So you pop Ragamuffins before Berserk resolves, and you take the card off the top, preferably like a blue non-attack. And then you put the six back on top and flip it, and then you get to draw that card. So it makes sure that Berserk works at least once and draws you a card. The ceiling is very, very, very high. Obviously, it could just be pretty C minus, and you draw all reds, and it's like whatever. You just drew one extra red card, but that could be one extra red card for you to play like a Savage Beatdown or something like that, and turn 12 damage off. So or turn 12 damage on. So that is what Ragamuffins is for. Other than that, I've noticed some small like niche things while testing. When you're moving to end, let's say you didn't get like your Pogger's turn, and you're moving to end and you have one card left, and you're like, man, I really don't want this card. Like, let's see if I can get something else. You can pop Ragamuffins before you move to end and just swap it with the top, and then be like, yeah, I don't even want that in my next hand. Like, put it on bottom, get a new card for your arsenal. So it's got a few different little like tech things that you could do with it actually.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I like it.
Yeah, it is really good tech. I wasn't expecting it when you sent me this list first. That was the first thing I noticed was like, wow, Ragamuffin's hat. I said, this isn't a Kano list.
No, we're just making sure we can do crazy brute stuff.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. So the next thing I kind of want to go over is just looking over the deck, I see you have a lot of one of red attacks. So you have one Wild Ride, one Savage Swing, one Bear Fangs, and one Alpha Rampage. Whereas traditionally, most Rhinar decks and Blitz run like two of as reds. So can you kind of explain the thought process and why one ofs of those certain cards?
Yeah, so again, remember I was saying the high variance, right? And like
Hmm.
let's say you're having a bad day and you go second all day long. Non-blocks are really, really, really unfortunate, like when you need to block. So
Yeah.
I wanted to eliminate the amount of non-blocks that I had, but like still giving myself like the tools. It's also not bad. Like too many of them is bad, but like so that's why I feel like the one ofs are okay. In a world where, I didn't have to block into so many decks, I would just run Pulping, Wild Ride, Bear Fang. I'd run the whole nine, or six in this case, um, to just get like the value out of the crazy brute stuff. But in efforts to like have something crazy in your deck, but also be able to survive through like the low side of the variance. The deck blocks really well aside from one Bare Fangs, one Wild Ride, and two Tear Limbs. The deck blocks really well. So those are all contenders to be cut and subbed out for something else. But again, with it being a high variance format, I kind of like the little edge that those cards give.
Right.
Cool.
Yeah. Awesome. Um, then the next thing I want to talk or ask you about is you have both Romping Club and Mandible Claws. Now I know in Blitz the sideboard for equipment is more spread out versus CC because CC you mainly use your sideboard slots for like your deck, but because Blitz is only 40 cards, most of your sideboarding goes towards equipment, right? So I just want to ask, like, what matchups are we looking to run Romping Club or Mandible Claws in?
Well, to be honest, I haven't really figured that out. Like you said, I just put it in the list because you can have it.
Hmm.
So I've been running some games. I usually always run Claw. It's just so much better, and you don't have to, you know, roll scabs or anything like that. But I thought with with having beaten trackers now, and that guaranteed action point, I didn't actually hate the idea of romping club because then you just have one like really good turn where you swing club for like value, and then you just try to play it smart the rest of the game. Um, so I haven't really worked it out, but if I had to assume, I would say claws into pretty much everybody because you're racing, and then like maybe romping club into. Uh, Bravo or Oldham or something like that. Or yeah, I mean like it's really tough. Again, because if you get those blood rushes, and you weren't anticipating it, and you're like, oh, I'm going second, I'm gonna pick club. It's consistent, it does more damage, whatever.
Right.
And then you get those blood rushes. It really feels bad to have to rely on like a scabs roll. As you can see, gamblers aren't even in the list
Hmm.
because it's high variance. Barkbone pairs really well with Skull Crushers when you roll a 5 or a 6. And it's not like you lose your turn, it's just how much pitch you gain.
Mhm.
So, to be honest, I could see myself maybe taking out like Skull Crushers for Gambler's Gloves, and then like you just become like the Rolly version or whatever. But I like this version a lot because I like as much as I love Brute and how crazy it is. I do enjoy blocking. Like I like playing smart. I like the chess game. Um, so yeah, I can't really tell you which ones I'd use club into. I just know that it's probably better into a couple of matchups, and I usually just run claws because the Blood Rush turns are nuts.
Right.
One of those matchups, just out of curiosity, would you consider playing club into Kano just so you know like you're gonna have like room for floating if you have to block?
Yeah, I've considered that, but that's another one of those matchups where it's like if you don't have like lethal, like from Kano's perspective, if you don't have lethal on the board that isn't like rolling a dice for an action point, um, and again, we have beaten trackers, so like maybe that is something I should test into. But it just feels really bad not to have 10 go again sitting on the board, and Kano's like, man, I really got to think about whether I respond to this. Versus if you have gamblers, scab skins, and club, then they're like, oh well, they may roll a fucking two, and then
Hmm.
like I let that resolve, I block out, I set up, I do a bunch of damage on my turn, and then I kill them on their turn. So that's actually a really good idea though, Brandon. I should try that out with Alex.
Yeah, I was just curious because like no matter what, um, it's just gonna be a buffed, hopefully buffed club, and like realistically, beforehand you could pop your breakbone and you could probably do 15, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. The ceiling with Rhinar, 2015 is pretty easy.
exactly. I was just wondering that. So you're basically only running your scab skins and your crown into guardians, I'm assuming.
So currently, what I've been testing is I do the same thing every time, just to see like the consistency and see if I even need the other equipment. So I've been running crushers, ragamuffins, beaten trackers, and barkbone into everything, and just
Oh,
seeing like if it's enough. And for the most part, it is. I've noticed a few games where like I would have preferred to have a little bit more block and do like the block setup blood rush turns. But again, like I was testing the theory out to see if Ragamuffins was even good. There could be like a go first, put Ragamuffins in this in, go second, put Crown in this in type thing.
Gotcha.
Cool. Um, Savage Beatdown. Does it work? And when it works, how nasty is it?
It's probably one like it's one of my favorite cards. Like out of all the, I mean, like Skullcrack is obviously nuts, and I think it deserves a spot in the list in Blitz and CC. But
Agreed.
Savage Beatdown, go ahead, B.
Oh, I just said I agree 100%.
Yeah. Um, Savage Beatdown is like I call it Alpha Rampage's daddy because Alpha Rampage is so good when, at the very beginning of the game or at the end of the game. But in the middle of the game, Alpha Rampage is dog shit in most people. Savage Beatdown is good all of the time, so it's the daddy. It's tough to pull off sometimes, you have to get an activator, so Blood Rush, anything that discards, and then an additional action point if you don't already have one. But it is so good. Like I didn't think it would be at first because one of my buddies a long time ago told me that intimidate essentially meant -3 block, right? Because you take
Mhm.
a card out of their hand. Um, well, in a lot of cases, people don't care about block, and then in the aggro decks, they're 4 power 2 block, so it's not -3 block, it's -2 block, and they're not even throwing that at you. They're not even gonna block with it because they're gonna throw 4 damage at you. So Savage Beatdown is 12 fucking damage.
Yeah.
Like it's so good. Um, it's really just in the list because it's another 6, block 3, and if you can pull it off, it's awesome, and I think it gets you ahead. Um, but ultimately, this list, you're one either hoping to do something crazy going first, and you have such a lead that like through the rest of the game you just block efficiently and like throw attacks when you need to. Um, uh, or two, like I said, the other version, like once I find it, because I was just testing the high variance side, maybe running club and like I even considered putting in boys, I even considered putting in Ironhide because I do have the like taking out Tear Limb, putting in Primeval Bellow because that's an activator and it gives +3 and turns on claws and everything like that. And with Skullcrack, like it's fucking nuts. Uh, but taking that out so you block a little bit better, and then just leaving the Bear Fangs and the Wild Rides in because I think those cards are so good in certain situations. And then you just rock Ironhide so you can pitch that card to block too. Like I didn't think that that was like that bad, but
Hmm.
um, there's just so many different things you can do, and you only get 40 cards.
Right.
Yeah.
Um, and then like I think understanding your local like meta for Blitz is very important too,
Yeah.
as to like what you bring and what you put into your deck.
Yeah. Absolutely. But yeah, the
Do you
deck
mind
seems. Go ahead, Brandon. Sorry.
do you mind if I ask one important question with Berserk being in your main board? Have
Yeah.
you considered Primeval Bellow? Like was
Yeah.
that was in a consideration?
Yeah, so it's I've tested that card so many times since these cards came out because like in theory Blood Rush is a 1 for +2 1 intimidate, right?
Hmm.
Well, Red Primeval Bellow is a 0 for 5 intimidate and it does everything, it's an activator, it discards a 6 and turns everything on. So and the best you could get out of Blood Rush typically, unless you have like some crazy turn, is +6. So red primeval is already like more consistent than like if you were to claw one attack or claw arsenal. Um, so I have considered running Rainbow of that card. The only downside is like if you ran Rainbow of that card, you're probably taking Blood Rush out of your deck. And Blood Rush is just very good and very consistent as it is, and it has a card to pull the blue out of your hand or it costs 1, which pulls the blue out of your hand,
Hmm.
whereas Primeval is cost 0. Like, and I get what you're saying, like you play Berserk and then you play that card. Um, but it just it hasn't felt as good. And then if you have two of them in your hand, like you have two red primevals and then say a swing big and then a wrecker romp, you're like, man, what do I do with this hand? Like I'm just hoping for the low, like the 25% that I hit the card that I want to hit.
Yeah. No, I was just curious because it just like popped in my head and I was like, oh, that works well with Berserk.
That's why I was just saying, like, I would, if I were to change anything about this deck right now, like, I'm probably leaving the Bear Fangs in the Wild Ride because having the two of, like, two non-blocks isn't that bad. But I could definitely see myself taking Tear Limb out for a Primeval for like a little bit more consistency and having two less non-blocks in the deck. But when you get that card, Tear Limb, and it works, like, it pulls you ahead so much, especially against the decks with a lot of armor.
Yeah.
Uh,
Cool.
Imagine tear limb into like what's that card? Savage Beatdown.
Yeah, dude, it's 18. It's Pog. Dude, when I put before the PQ season, I made a Berserk Rhinar and then took Berserk out, but like left all the aggro stuff in,
Uh-huh.
and I did get that off on an old him, and it felt really good.
They're just like, oh, I'm sorry, three for what? Three for what? Huh? How
Three
much
for
is that
18.
for? And you
That's too.
intimidated me? Stop.
Block 6, take 12.
Yeah. But no, the deck seems really well rounded. I like the fact that it does block very well, except for the exception of like the four non-blocks, like you were saying.
Yeah.
But yeah, it seems really well. So how does it do? So I don't know what our local meta is, yeah, obviously yet because Skirmish is a couple. Is it like a month away?
April.
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 So let's just go off of like last season or like even the characters that we know are pretty dominant in Blitz. So like Kano, Kasai, and like Benji, I'd say, right? And Chain. So
We'll
how does
see how
it?
Benji does with that mask ban, though.
Oh yeah, that's right. So maybe not Benji, maybe just Chain, Kano, and Kasai. So how does Rhinar kind of do into those three? We'll call them like the top three meta decks for Blitz at the moment. Take that with a grain of salt though, but
So I actually didn't have to make sure like Wild Rides and Bear Fangs worked. I didn't have Barragings in here for a minute, and I got demolished by Alex. I was testing into Alex, and it's just, and I was trying to figure out why. I was like, it's so consistent. There's so many sixes, like it's always gonna work. Uh, but what doesn't work is that you just play an attack, intimidate a card, and have like one floating. Maybe you haven't drawn your cards yet, and then Kano like blows you up. So and then you block obviously, and then your turn's like not as good. So like Kano just wins that exchange. So barraging is just really good because it forces them to decide if they're gonna go like you one card in arsenal, three cards in hand, red barraging. They have to decide at that exact moment while you have all the cards if they're gonna go off on you. And
right.
if they
Hmm.
do, you block like what you can, and then you throw like a big attack or a big claw at them. Um, and their turn was less. Like you win that exchange. So it's just a really good deterrent for Kanos like going off on you, and the ceiling's very high for like turn zero. Getting a lot of damage into where they don't have a whole bunch of agency in the game. Um, Chain and Kasai. Well, I think Chain has always been one of those heroes where if I need like a little bit of luck, and that's why I built this because everyone still plays Chain and Blitz, and this is like nuts. If I get to go first. Um, but they just have so much. Chain just has so much armor. I need like a little bit of luck with like some of his banishes. Otherwise, I think he's just incredibly favored in the matchup. But that's also why I wanted to like be able to block and like set stuff up because eventually Chain could have a bunch of blood debt and he takes residual damage and yada yada. So yeah, maybe I take Club out for one of those Ironhide pieces because I keep the two non-blocks and I do put the Primeval Bellows in or something like that. But and then same thing with Kasai. I think just good trades. If she gets her blood on her hands pretty early and has a decent amount of copper, it's gonna feel really bad. But again, that's why I like blocking and then we have our win con reckless swing. So I think Chain's still unfavored, but there's a good possibility you pull it. I think Kasai's probably 50-50. I don't feel terrible in that matchup to be honest. And then Kano adding the Barragins back in, I think is definitely favored for Rhinar, but our local wizard here is pretty nuts. So
He's all right. It's just a
He's a luck box.
luck
dude, every
box.
time he just
Mm.
gets every card he wants off the top. I swear.
Yeah. Yep.
Just pulls it out of his ass. He said, "Hey, look what I just found. It's blazing aether."
Well,
Oh,
well, well.
Mr.
Uh,
Kano, Tome?
yeah.
Wow.
All right, awesome.
Uh,
Brandon, you have any other questions about the deck at all?
No, I mean, I just would like to maybe see testing with the Primeval Bellow and see how that actually plays out because I think it, like you said, has a high skill ceiling. I definitely think it's probably a card you only play from Arsenal because then you're down to a 3 card hand right off the rip. But that that's about it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Jonah, any final thoughts about the deck? Anything for the people out there before we head out?
Yeah, just some key like lines that I kind of look for, like if you do end up on the back foot and you're just waiting to pop off. Savage Feast is probably the best card with beaten trackers because you get to draw a card. It's nuts with Beast Within, you get to draw 2 cards. And you know, remembering how to layer your triggers, so you get the choice. So an example would be you play Savage Feast, you pitch a blue, you discard, or sorry, you play Berserk. Let's do the whole thing, right?
Right.
Berserk, Savage Feast, pitch a blue, 1 floating, discard Beast Within. So there's 3 triggers on the stack, and you get to layer them however you want. If you blocked with like a pack call and you know there's a 6 on top, then of course you want to do Beast Within first, take 1 damage, draw that card. Uh, and then before Berserk resolves, you would want to use the Ragamuffins or whatever, and then whatever Savage Feast draws, it doesn't have to be a 6. So just order it accordingly and stuff like that. But the Savage Feast beaten trackers is probably like one of the best combos in the game,
Okay,
or
awesome.
in this deck. Sorry, not in the game.
Yeah. In the game, Rhinar's broken. You heard it here first.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, thanks for going over this deck and talking with us about it. I know Remley, shout out to Remley, will really appreciate it. And he's gonna net deck you and play this at Skirmish season probably.
Ab Dad.
Bad dad.
All right. Awesome. Well, this has been Two Pitch Floated, and we'll catch you guys later.
Peace.
Amo.